All right, the clock shows 10:05. Good morning, everyone. This is Thomas Tieger from Luxion. I'm the Vice President of Products and Strategy. Some of you may already know me from the past. It has been a while since I did one of these webinars, yeah, it was this time of year where I thought, it would be good to get the feet wet again and speak to you guys. And of course, I'm not nowhere near of the technical caliber that we have with our creative team here. And that's why I thought we'd do it slightly differently this time around. It's always helpful, I think, to answer your questions that you may have. Certainly, as you know, we have a lot of resources available that are available to you, if you will, 24/7, such as our forum. I always want to point out, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, here's our website right here on our forum. If you ever get stuck, have a question, need a suggestion, want to share your examples, your work, get some feedback, go here. We have some fantastic supporters here, including ourselves, where we're trying to really at least comment on every post that goes up there. But pointing out some of the our great supporters here. Tim Fayer on the forum. I don't know whether he's on the webcast, but Tim Fayer is one. Bill Gould, I know he's here today. Hi, Bill. Fantastic support. Then also, going back, our website, always a good stop for under the resources tab right here, where you can actually contact support directly. And also the learning sections, nothing to be forgotten about, that we have all of our tutorials. All of the webinars that we have done over the last year and a half or so, you can find right here, as well as any kind of quick tips. You know that the quick tips are something that we include in our newsletter that goes out monthly. And I'm sure you don't always have time to go through that, but it's always helpful to go back and take a look here at what has been covered here in the past. So these are kind of anywhere from 5 to 7 minute videos that really pick up on a certain topic and show you some of the, as the name says, quick tips, some of the tips and tricks inside a KeyShot, and how to achieve certain aspects that you want to demonstrate in your final image. Now, for today's webinar, again, it's a Q&A, a live session, if you will. We're standing by here just to feel free to answer or to ask any kind of questions. Bruno and myself, Bruno Ferreira, for those of you who haven't met him yet, he is our latest addition to the team. He is mainly handling support these days, so you send him an email or call him. He's the one who is taking care of you most of the time. And he'll be helping me out today answering some of your questions that you may have. We also had asked, as we sent out our newsletter and on the registration page, to send in any kind of questions prior to the webinar, so we can actually go through that and answer that for you live. Now, I have received several questions, and to summarize that, what we're going to be talking about is just general materials. I'll talk a little bit about texturing, in particular labeling. There were some questions about cylindrical mapping. Then we're going to talk about lighting a little bit, always a hot topic, so we're going to touch upon that as well. There's some questions about cameras, and then some more general questions about importers, plugins, and so forth. So let's get started here. The version that I'm using is the latest KeyShot version that we have available on the forum right now. It hasn't been actually publicized through the automatic update yet, but if you want to get a hold of this version, go to the forum. You have to be a member, and you find the links, or just send an email to license@luxion.com, and we'll send you the links right here. And you'll see this is version 3.2.36. So that's the latest version that we're actually using. It's an update to the original 3.2 release, and really the focus of this update, again, was bug fixes. So the first topic that I want to cover here is materials, and in particular talk a little bit about material assignments. What I have here is a solid edge file, or assembly I should say. It's a mountain bike that we have downloaded from our friends at GrabCAD. See, it actually imports quite quickly here. Once again, similar to the SolidWorks importer, the Solid Edge importer also reads in the tessellated information that is stored in the file. And with all of our as with all of our importers, we maintain the assembly structure in here quite nicely, including all the sub-assemblies and so forth, with all the names, and then to some degree also the material names, as far as they have been actually assigned inside of the Solid Edge, or speaking in more general terms, in the CAD software. So as we move this around, yeah, it's a little off the ground here. I'm not going to worry about that for too much now, to just so we can focus on really the topic on hand here, and really dive into these, the kind of like the questions that you had about that. Now, as you can see, as I have this open here, let's take a look at the the project window. The scene tree, we have the 3 tabs. Of course, for those of you who have been using KeyShot 3 for a while, are familiar with that. New was here, the in-project material library that you actually have here. So what that actually really is the these are all the materials with their names as they are being used inside of the the current scene. Now, when we open up our library, of course, nothing new here, especially in 3.2. But actually, as we introduced 3.2, for those of you who haven't actually upgraded, one thing is that now our materials are loading much quicker. So before that, it didn't actually re-render them necessarily each time you open that library, but it took some time to just read in the over 700 materials that come in by default. But now it's basically instant. Same as actually with our environments, just loads instantly. So assigning materials, as you know, is a simple thing here. Just taking it and dragging and dropping it, as you know. Nothing too surprising here. Now, of course, as you apply this material, you will see actually that this material gets added to your in-project material library, and the material that was originally on there, which was one of the original Solid Edge materials, is gone. So it will be automatically replaced. Now, if we focus just on painting the frame, there are several ways of how we can actually do this. So we can actually keep on dragging and dropping the same paint onto all the parts here in the frame here. What you see is here, what's happening here on the right-hand side in the materials, it will actually create an instance. This is how it is actually implemented right now. So for each one of them that you have applied, you get basically a unique material. Not saying this is ideal. We're looking actually into optimizing that. But there is another way of actually applying these materials. So this is one way of doing it. In mind, actually, when you have a number of parts, this may be a little bit cumbersome because there's a lot of dragging and dropping and a lot of mouse travel involved with that. So we can, of course, undo this. Undo stack has been greatly improved with version 3.2 as well. And let's grab this paint again, applied here. So again, see it gives again a new name here. And then the other way of actually applying materials is an old way of doing it, and that is basically copying pasting. And the way you do that is you hold down the Shift key and you click with your left mouse button to copy the material. And then to apply it to other components, you hold down the Shift key and then click, you keep that pressed and click with your right mouse button, and you apply the material to the other components here. So let's just focus on those 3 or 4 parts here that we have highlighted. There is a difference now when we take a look back at the materials. As you notice, we will only have one blue material here. And this is also something that, especially for those of you who have been who started out with the original HyperShot that goes back now 5 years, when it has been 5 years since HyperShot has been originally introduced. When you copy and paste the material in the past, even with KeyShot up to KeyShot 3, you would always create, just like dragging and dropping materials onto these individual parts, you would create instances of the material. And we changed that behavior in KeyShot 3, and some of you may have been thrown off by that behavior now, because the fundamental difference is now that you have only one material. Let me close this here for a second. And now let's double click on the down tube here. So double click, you see this opens up the material editor. And now actually, as we make a change here, the beauty about this is that all of these parts actually change color or whatever it may be, material type. So we go from a paint to a metal, for example, right? All of that changes the material simultaneously, which of course is a great thing. And the reason why we did this is when you actually pick a material out of your material library, and it is the same material, of course the intentions are that you want to apply the same material to these various components and not necessarily instances of that. So if you have to adjust your material to make it look right or to explore with it, to do slight tweaks to it, you want to make sure that this changes on all the parts that carry the same material, so you don't have to copy and paste this over and over again. Now, looking here into our in-project material library, we see that our original paint, gloss blue number 4, has changed, right? The blue paint, there is nothing else left. It has changed. Yeah, so now with this changed material, you can actually move this back to, or save that back to your material library, if you will. Now, or several people have contacted me and said, "Hey, that doesn't work like the original implementation of HyperShot and KeyShot does." Because even if you now, let's say, take a completely different material, these components continue to be linked, which personally, that is absolutely fantastic, right? So this works out of the box. So now the question, of course, is how do I kind of avoid that? So I'm used to copying and pasting these materials just as I have shown before, but how would I make sure that they don't get linked? Or how can I ensure that they can be unlinked? Because that was another thing. There is no way of unlinking. Not true, because what you can do is, now that we have actually, let's say we have these 4 pieces here, all you need to do is right-click on the individual component, say Unlink Material. You'll see immediately here in our in-project material library, we have an instance of that material because now it's a separate material. And now we can actually go in and just treat that separately. So that's one way of doing it. Right? And we can do that over and over again, and with all of them, and break it out that way. So now that I have basically this, let's take this blue color here with this blue paint and apply this to other objects. So we said Shift left click, Shift right click. That will copy and link. If you don't want that, and this is exactly the reverse behavior as it was prior to KeyShot 3. So you Shift left click, and then what you actually do, you hit down, you press Shift Control right click, and then you apply that material here, and you see exactly what's happening here. So now you're actually creating basically a copy of that material, same parameters, the exact same material, but it basically has an instance right here in the in-project material library, and now you can actually go ahead and then make changes individually without affecting any of the other parts. And now if I wanted to copy that over there, now I have to, of course, go back and shift left click and then shift control right click and paste that to the other part. So basically, bottom line is what we have done, we switched the behavior on you to basically make it simpler to work and manage your materials, so you don't end up necessarily with 1,000 individual materials. I know, Bill, for example, when you have these hundreds and hundreds of parts of your locomotive, for example, I think that is something that comes in really handy. Now, of course, for those of you who can absolutely not get used to change, we have done something for you here in the preferences. So if we go to interface, there is a checkbox where it says KeyShot 2 style material paste link, and that will work exactly like it used to work in the past. So when that is checked, then when you shift left click, shift right click, you get these parts, these individual materials and parts unlinked. And then if you do the shift control right click, when you apply that, then you get the linking. So I hope this helps and explains how things are actually working now inside of in KeyShot 3. Now, since we are open here, what we're thinking about doing is, and I'm a strong fan of it, but again, you are the audience, you are customers, you tell us whether this would be helpful. What I want to do, as I showed you, right, if I take this, whatever these materials here, just like I take this blue again and then apply it here, just like I've shown you, and apply it here and apply it here. What I would like to do is, by default, have only one copy of this material. And then if you actually need to unlink it, you can always do that and just right-click and unlink. This is something that we're thinking about for KeyShot 4. However, here's your chance. You know, speak out. Let us know. Yes, that is great. No, this sucks. Don't do it. Tell me now, tell me later, whenever you want. But really, we're looking for your input, whether this would be a welcome change or not, whether we should actually leave the current behavior as we have it right here. All right, I hope that this answers the questions about materials in terms of how they are being applied. I'm just looking at the question again. Yeah, this was the shift left click, shift right click, the ability to turn off linking. I think I've went through that. And yeah, and how I can actually break out materials from the material groups. By the way, also always would like to remind you that there are ways of painting things in a more efficient way. For example, if you have an entire subassembly, for example. I mean, this is, again, it's not necessarily an example that applies, but I think you get the idea. If you have a subassembly, and let's say, this is all going to be stainless steel or whatever, or the same paint or whatever it may be, rather than dragging and dropping it onto each and every part here or copying and pasting, shift left click, shift right click, another way of doing things is just taking this and moving it all the way over to your scene tree and basically applying the material right on the whatever level it may be. Subassembly level, assembly level, and then everything will be actually painted the same way on the same material, and they will also be automatically linked. If you run into issues, let's say where you import your model, you have it all broken out, by parts. You have your assemblies, your sub-assemblies, and let's say also you assign the materials. Right now, let's say if you have the same materials on individual parts, on several individual parts, and it has the same materials like in SolidWorks, for example, what KeyShot will do right now, it will actually link everything by that material first. It's not something that I'm particularly happy about, but this was something that came with it based on the architectural change that we did with KeyShot 3 for animation. Further down the road for KeyShot 4, we're looking at something that allows you to basically ignore these the colors, and really just import by kind of like the part names and then link, instance part names, or if you wish to import by color, and then it actually the color takes priority over the part breakout. But my point is, if you come across that and you notice that all of a sudden your parts are linked, you can always click on the individual part as I've shown you and break it out right here. We can just say, okay, unlink this material, right? Immediately it will also be reflected here inside of my scene tree. When I'm looking over here, you'll see that actually that particular part right here, this is the one that I just changed. We'll get an instance, so now you can treat it actually separately. And now we can actually do, for example, this, search for rubber and apply the right material here so it looks a little more meaningful. So this is one way of breaking things out. If you really, once again, you want to maintain this, you want to just, but you want to make sure that you can deal with all these parts individually, you can actually click on the top level assembly and you can say unlink material on that top level assembly. So let me just make this window a little wider right here and see what happens now. Now all of these paints here, the gloss deep crimson is getting instanced. And now you have, once again, all these parts actually as individual parts, meaning they're no longer part of that that material group. Let me just check. I forgot what we have here. Yeah, these are individual parts. Another thing that I wanted to show you is if you have, for example, parts that are linked by material across multiple assemblies, you can always select multiple parts and then unlink them as well. So that works as well. So they don't necessarily have to be in the same assembly or sub-assembly. They can also be spread out throughout the entire model itself. And then, of course, as you see, the nice thing about that is we can go back all the way to the beginning. Undo stack is quite reliable. I think it only missed one thing right here, and that's the forking. So we got to look into that. What I did. I think there's one command that wasn't respected, but for the most part, I got back to the very beginning. So I think that just telling Bruno to make a note of it, so we can actually look into that issue, why I didn't actually undo that particular one, this particular material assignment. All right, so I think we exhausted this. I hope this will help you as you are going back to your projects and working with your materials. Again, this is not anything specific to any kind of like file type. This is just really the nature of how KeyShot works, whether you're working in SolidWorks, Pro Engineer, or Creo, Solid Edge, all of that. So you have the same behavior basically across the board. So same with Rhino, SketchUp, you name it. Now, what I want to get into now is a little bit of labeling the labeling. There always have been some questions in particular because we had some issues in the past when we dealt with especially the cylindrical mapping and applying the labels, to cylindrical surfaces. So let's just paint a couple of objects or components right here. For example, what I like to, you've seen this one here, select parts with material. Actually, in this particular case, we'll only select one. But let's say if I do this, and now do that, it will actually select all of those, and then you can actually do a show only, and it will only show these materials, or these parts that actually have the identical material assigned. For the demonstration purposes, I'm just going to unlink also this bottom part, so I can just deal with it individually. It makes it a little easier. Now, when we there was one question when working with labels, for example, in particular, it doesn't matter what kind of projection type you're using. Let's just go in and apply this label here that I have, and just so we don't see this also skewed, just apply it like this, and just leave it at that. So first of all, whether it's labels, textures, it doesn't really matter what file type it actually is. It doesn't mean one works better than the other, not at all. Whether you have a JPEG, of course, when you have a JPEG image, with labels, a JPEG oftentimes doesn't make sense because a label means it is a sticker. So oftentimes you're concerned about transparency. So in this particular case, if we had that KeyShot logo here as a label, that wouldn't actually do much for us. So you want to make sure you have a BNG file or a TIFF file that has the alpha built in. But again, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter which one you use. Also doesn't mean that one is suited better than others for the individual mapping type that you're actually using. For textures, of course, JPEGs, they always make sense, right? Because you're tiling, you're actually replacing, if you will, the color information. And if you use it as a bump map, then of course you're replacing the entire the surface finish, if you will. Now, other question was also, as we were on this topic, about let's see, how it can be used with like UV mapping. Let's just back up. I'm just going to blank this, and since we are here, so let's take a look here. Let's go to our texture library here, and just to make it visible right here. So by default, these are the UV coordinates that you have, right? So the only thing that you can actually do when it comes to that, well, I mean, you still have options of actually changing it, right, in terms of how your texture is being applied, but there is no way of actually changing those UV coordinates. So the UV coordinates, they come actually out of the originating system, and if KeyShot actually detects that there are UV coordinates present, even just on individual parts and not the entire model, these UV coordinates will not be touched. So whether you're using then ProEngineer or Creo or Rhino or SolidWorks, we maintain those kind of UV maps that have actually been applied. If there are no UV maps that have been applied, you will actually notice that it's getting somewhat distorted, or there could be some default. It's like in this particular case, doesn't actually give you very good results at all. So in this particular case, what you want to do then is change the mapping type here. We're not basically changing it. Well, yeah, we're changing it, but on the other hand, your UV coordinates will always be untouched, right? And then we just change it over to a box map. You can do then, of course, depending on the geometry that you're actually working with, a planar map, and then, of course, a spherical and a cylindrical map. So whatever works best in each of particular cases. Especially when you're working with a tool like Maya or 3D Studio Max, right? That's where you also have UV mapping tools actually built in, where you can really just lay out your UV maps. Great news here is that these are being fully maintained, and as you're laying out these textures based on the UV maps that you have, some of the people just lay out your entire UV map, just flatten the entire outside of a model, then lay out the UV maps, and then when you bring that into KeyShot, it's beautifully maintained. The textures may not apply automatically, so you have to reassign them, but on the other hand, your UV maps are being maintained throughout the import process, and you just continue to work with them, so no worries here. All right, let's go back to our label here in particular. Let's take a look at some of the mapping types here. Oftentimes, I mean, by default, you see it's normal projection. And the normal projection works actually 9 out of 10 cases, works quite well, right? I mean, it's just taking it directly from like the camera angle that it has been applied at. That's why you see kind of the somewhat of the kind of like a crooked angle, but then you have that the angle slider here where you can nicely position that right here. And for, I mean, this particular example here, this might be actually the ticket and be good enough to kind of get a label then positioned properly, and just wraps around nicely here. And yeah, it may distort a little too much here. So it depends. You got to play around with it. Maybe just reduce the scale a little bit, and you instantly get quite good results here with the normal projection. Right? Just adjust the angle a little bit, and you got that. So of course I moved that. So when you are, this is one of the things, and I admit you saw that right now happening. When you are in the position mode here, and then you're trying to move your camera, you see with the left mouse key, it actually doesn't work, and we should probably put a hint in what you actually need to do. And especially when you move right here on the object, when you click on the object itself, and because you're trying to move your camera, well, all you do is actually move your label again. So this is, I totally agree, it's a little annoying. Just as a rule of thumb, just make sure you hit down the Alt key, right? And then you basically get all your camera controls back. So we'll definitely look into that as far as making that a little more obvious here when you're working with that in that mode that we give you somewhat of a warning on how to actually move your camera. I think that it's the same, of course, with in texture mapping when you position these, and I think not so much when you actually get the like a texture manipulation tool or the move tool. I think the normal projection in conjunction with the positioning tool is kind of like the only mode where this can actually throw you off. So that's hopefully one of the, again, lessons learned here. Other things you see right here, let's also turn off the shadows here real quick. Maybe we should hit that only once. You see actually, of course in this case it actually doesn't matter. But let's say you have geometry where it does matter how often this label actually shows up. So you don't want this to project too deeply here. The right here in the labels dialog, and this when you work with normal projection, you have this this depth slider. Basically, this will determine on how deep that projection actually goes. Right, and as I'm actually moving this, I don't see it right there. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now you see that we actually only get it on the on the outside and not on the inside. So also something to consider. And it's the same actually if you try to apply this label actually here on the inside, the depth slider, it would work, it will only look at really the projection to the, that's the right term, to the right, what's kind of behind it. You know, it won't project back into the other direction. So that's also something, especially when working with glass, for example, you know, that's when it comes up. Something to keep in mind, or as you see right here, especially if, let's say, we had like the fork, if we try to project on one object, it's the same material, want to make sure that it's just not projecting all the way through onto the other side, because if you want to have a logo on, let's say, the other, or the same logo on the other side of the fork, you would actually apply a second label there, rather than projecting it all the way through from one direction. Okay. So far about normal projection. Again, works great, I think. Works quite well in most of the cases. But let's take a look also at the cylindrical mapping here as well, because that was something that in the past has had caused a little bit of heartburn here. All right, so we'll look at our mapping tool right here. And the first thing that we actually do, you see, is it's coming up right here. The first thing I always recommend here, what you want to do is you want to position your tool, basically the mapping tool, according to the geometry that you are projecting on. So now what I'm doing here is I'm just slightly rotating it. We already have the proper position. It was actually centered to the part itself. And we'll see that actually this is slightly here offset. Of course, I messed around with it first in normal mode. So what I would like to do is just somewhat bring this back. So obviously it's 90 degrees here. Right, and so we'll see where that logo is right now. So it's up here. And then I'm just going to grab it here and just bring this, rotate this down, just like that. And that's really all that is required. And then I can actually translate that and just move it up and down here on my cylinder. And maybe in this particular case, because when you use cylindrical mapping, it may not necessarily maintain the proper aspect ratio. So we'll just tweak it here a little bit. Just to, let's say, get the proper aspect ratio. That looks pretty good. And then I can actually collapse the scale slider here, and I get the overall scale. And, then we just make it bigger, make the whole thing a little bigger. Okay, just something like that. And so I have the flexibility just moving it up and down my the tube here. Let's see. I think you get the idea. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. And that's one of the things that we're actually looking at improving for KeyShot 4 as well. But on the other hand, it gets the job done today, and allows you really to get your labels and or textures, but mostly labels, you're concerned about that, onto pretty much any kind of geometry. So I hope that also answers the questions about about the cylindrical mapping. Once again, it doesn't matter what file type you're actually using. Really only matters whether you apply that as a label or as a texture. One does not give better results than others. So again, just take a label, you know, any kind of PNG, TIFF, or TIFF file, apply it, and then use the you know, use the proper mapping type that we have here presented. Another question here that that we had, and it continues to come up, and especially you know, in the past when we had KeyShot with KeyShot 2, the first thing that I always noticed when people were posting their renderings, especially newcomers on the forum, I always my first comment always was, you know, you're kind of like, you know, everything just looks too dark. Let's do this here. Okay, this is fine. So images always would end up looking just way too dark, you know, and that was based on the fact that the gamma setting was at a default of 1.2. Now going back here, and here just you know, took the finished mountain bike from you know, that Rex actually has created for us. And so when I look at the so in our settings in the past, we had a default gamma setting of 1.2, and that just inherently was just way too dark. So if you want to see here what this would look like, it's, yeah, and depending on the environment, you lose the detail here in these darker areas. So we made the change with KeyShot 3 to go to a default gamma setting of 2. What we also do with that, and you see immediately, of course, you get the detail back immediately. What we also have done, of course, with that is that we automatically adjust the textures based on the current gamma setting, so it always looks correct. Now, well, still, depending on the individual environment that you may use, it still may be not right. Maybe some areas are too hot, of course. Gamma setting will not do anything for you there. But maybe it's also too contrasty based on the lighting environment that you use. And so I would like to talk a little bit about that in terms of what can be done. So here, these are, of course, the default environments that come with KeyShot. Let's take a look at this one here in particular. Let's turn on the environment itself. It's a good environment, but you know, it can have some issues. When you look at this, this is super blown out here. You know, over here also is quite bright, and then the rest of the inside here is quite dark. So it has a very high contrast. You know, and what it leads to, I mean, it has also kind of like this blue hint here, and what it leads to, it could lead to, you know, some blown out areas and so forth. Right? So how can we fix this? So various tools. Well, first of all, you know, to get the lighting right, as everybody knows, nothing new here. Just as we're rotating it around, you know, so we get the proper lighting. Of course, the hotkey. Always remind people of that. The control left mouse button controls that. You don't have to even be open. You don't have to be in the project window to do that. By the way, it's always, I don't know how many times we have mentioned it, but I'd like to reiterate, when in doubt, what are the hotkeys right here? Hit the K key, or as I've shown you under the help menu right here, hotkeys overview. Definitely ask you, just take a look. All of those hotkeys are actually being outlined right here, right? So now, one of the things that we can do here, let's say I have my angle somewhat chosen nicely. The lighting direction in general is good, but you know, even if I'm just hiding the environment, you see this is it's just too much here. So let's bring this back real quick. One way of doing it, the first thing I can do is that will give you an immediately a better result is just knock down that or knock back that contrast here. In the past, that was called gamma, but look what happens immediately. So contrast, really, what it is, as we're bringing it back, it has less contrast. That means the darker areas are less dark and the brighter areas are less bright, right? And immediately you get a better result, I think, that is much more kind of like neutral and gives you much better lighting here for this object. So this is that's the first step that you can do. Another way of dealing with this would actually be the, working with the height. So for example, if light is not hitting, especially when it hits on areas where where it causes like hot spots. So for example, if you just focus right up here, this area where the kind of like the steering tube and the fork kind of hit meet the upper tube here. You can see, right? I mean, as I'm moving this, it just creates these undesired hotspots here. So just by simply moving the height, you can actually avoid this. So also a useful tool that is one of those where you can always, immediately get better results. Again, of course, by doing that, your bike still sits on the ground plane. If we're looking at the, let's say just the neutral background environment, which is just hidden the environment. So I'm still getting all the shadows, of course, and all the proper reflections, but just slightly moved. And then for the pro users of you that we have introduced a new tool in KeyShot 3.1, which is a light version of an HDR light editor. So we're continuing to support HDR Light Studio here, but here is the KeyShot editor, and what that does is, well, it takes basically any kind of HDRI that you apply. So all it has to be is spherical, so it doesn't have to be ours. Any kind of HDRI, and opens up in this editor. Now you see immediately the image is flattened right here. And when we turn on the environment here in our real-time window, you see you get somewhat of a lower resolution here of the of the HDRI as we are actually manipulating it. So the first thing what's always really helpful is right here, for example, knock back the saturation. So as I'm doing this, you see actually how it actually is much less saturated now. And that can also help just, by just bringing down kind of like one of the intensities that you may see in the lighting environment. Another thing that you can also change is, of course, the hue, right, which is quite helpful. If an image is, for example, is too blue, you want to add some warmth to it. Well, now you get it a little too red. But just as we are moving that along here, so maybe that gives us a little bit of a different hue that is kind of desired. Or we just leave it as is, and then work, for example, with a couple pins to further edit the environment and kind of work with the lighting a little better. So the pins here that we have introduced, and this might actually help in particular in this case here. What it allows you to do is basically just set a light, if you will, right? And then you can change the color. Of course, for example, if you just want to make it slightly yellow here, for example, to bring some warm light underneath. So this will just allow us to move these around, and I can have as many pins as I want. And the nice thing is when I save this HDRI out, it will actually maintain all that and become this editable, HDZ file. So it's our own file format, but it maintains all this information that you actually have added to the image. Now, when we blend it, it just blends more into the environment itself, so it's not so pronounced, and we'll actually take in the lighting that is in the HDRI and then project it back onto the object. But now in particular, we worry about this area here, which is still, end of the day, just way too bright. So while I said these pins are actually used for adding lights, but they can actually be used to reduce light as well. So for example, let's do this. Let's move this pin over here. Right, and of course now it's even brighter. But now what we're doing is actually we turn down the brightness until we actually get something that is dark. And then we blend this. And then you can control it, you know, how much light do you want to actually take away from here. And now maybe we actually add the make that a little bigger. And now you see immediately what we're getting here. We're still getting some light shining through here, but much, much less than what we had before, right? And gives me overall just a much better result. Once I'm satisfied with that, all I need to do is say, generate the high resolution image for KeyShot. So now we're getting all the high resolution back with all the information that I actually have in the scene. I can close this here for now, right? And so have nicely, you see that kind of like the black circle here that I'm getting, but see how it actually nicely toned down this bright environment here. I can actually see what's outside of it. So it's really a very nice way of editing your lighting environment, and just with a couple of clicks, you know, get to the desired result. So a couple of other questions that I just want to answer right now. There was something about cameras, I think, where people get confused. We have changed the, if you will, the view/camera system also because of animation for KeyShot 3. But it's actually very simple to create your cameras, and then also you edit your cameras. For example, here, just like that, by default, we have a free camera. So if we add to it, so that is, if I want to save that view here, it's camera 3, and I can just rename that. Now, I think where the confusion came in was in version 3 and 3.1. Because you thought about, you know, a lot of people just said, okay, I'm going to lock this camera, you know, because I don't want to lose it. And which, of course, what locking a camera means is just like that you can't actually, you have no longer camera controls. And then they unlock it, and they think it still is locked, but how come, you know, it's now I'm in this camera, but you know, I'm really not in this camera because I'm basically moving it around. And this was part of the reason was that we didn't have the notification here. It would say, prior to KeyShot 3.2, it would just say Hero 1. So it would, you still have the impression of being kind of like in this camera, this Hero 1 camera, while in essence you're actually manipulating it. And this is exactly what we have here. So it's, yeah, you're in the unsaved basically state of that. And now if you just want to go back to your saved camera, just click on Hero 1 and you're back. If you want to make a change to that view, for a couple of ways to do that, you could always, you know, you can of course say, well, I want to raise my camera. I just add another camera here, so call it Hero 2, and I'm done with it, right? And so now I have basically, I have camera 1, that's a default camera here, Hero 2, and I can even, you know, when I'm actually in that in the basically the pull-down menu, when that is active, right, I can use my arrow keys and just toggle through these individual cameras. So there's my Hero 2 camera. Another thing that I can actually do is edit this camera if I want to. And now any kind of changes I make, right, let's say I want to raise that even further, you know, and maybe I change my perspective a little bit. Something like that. And then I say done. So now this basically did edit my Hero 2 camera here. So if I go back, this is what I now have. So I hope that explains things a little better on how our camera system works. Of course, all these cameras that you have here become available here for those of you who have the animation module, right? All of these cameras become cameras that can be animated, and the only camera that, of course, cannot be animated is the free camera. Now, the other question was, of course, when you're changing cameras and changing views, oftentimes you adjust your lighting, whether it's a lot or a little, it doesn't really matter, but oftentimes you have to adjust your lighting as well. The question is, does this information actually get saved as well? And the answer is not at this moment. So this is our goal also for KeyShot 4, looking into the possibility of actually saving these kind of trivial scenes, you know, so the camera information along with all the lighting information and the environment parameters, anything from, you know, adjusting the rotation, adjusting the height, and so forth, maybe even the intensity. So you actually really, when you toggle back and forth between these individual views and cameras, you really get the right lighting environment with the right view. Okay, then there were a couple of other questions that came in regarding importers. So there was the question about why KeyShot is importing hidden objects in Rhino files. I'm not aware of that, so I think we fixed that. When you bring it in directly through the importer, all the hidden files should be hidden. Also, if you experience that through the plugin, make sure you download the latest plugin from our website. That actually addresses the issue of hidden objects coming into KeyShot. So I definitely want to take a look at that. There was something else which I didn't cover because, again, I'm looking at our audience, but of course there was this question, is there an easy way to render green grass or trees? Well, first of all, you need to have the geometry, and the other thing is that once you have that, the best way of doing that is using the translucent material I think for trees mostly. Of course, when it comes down to the bark, you know, you want to texture map that and bump map that. But on the leaves itself, and it's the same for the grass, you know, use the translucent material. For those of you who really are so giddy and want to learn more about that, there is actually an interesting post on our forum. Just going to find it. Just go to our forum and type in grass. And there's a whole thread on, it was actually started by Brian, you know, on how to render grass. So you can go all nuts about it and learn more about it. But again, first things first, got to have the geometry. So we don't have a grass material that automatically gives you the nice little you know, perfect green grass right out of the chute. Other questions? Oh yeah, there was a question about animation. Is there a way to import SOLIDWORKS animation into KeyShot? If not, is it being considered to be added in the future versions? Well, right now, no, you can't. And this is not just for SOLIDWORKS, but also Pro-E, Creo, even Rhino. So we don't take animation in. The only animation information that we are actually supporting right now is part animations inside of the FBX file. So if you have Maya or Max and you save out these part animations as, into an FBX file, we read in those information types. But we're looking to expand that, you know, especially with Max and Maya also taking the camera information and then you know, bringing that back also to the native importers. As far as SolidWorks and other traditional CAD formats go, we're looking into it. It's not necessarily an easy task because it all depends on what kind of information is provided in the API and in the file type itself. So again, it's something that comes up frequently, and all I can say is we're looking into it. Can't promise anything at this point in time.
Somebody was asking about if you can import more than one import at a time.
Yeah, this is exactly. I didn't quite understand the question. It says, can you open more than one import at a time, or do you have to quit the application each time to open a new import. So I don't know whether that means, can you import a second bike here, or a second part, or an additional part into the same session? Which of course you can. You can import as much as you want here. Take, for example, if we take this assembly again, right? We can just say add to scene, and then just leave everything else. We can even say retain the materials, keep the same orientation, you know, and then just bring in that second object, and then it's being imported right away. It looks slightly different here, so I don't know. Maybe it was a different version of the assembly or something like that. But so that is possible. So then, of course, you have that. Because it came actually, yeah, okay, it was broken out separately. Okay, you know, and of course then you have that as a separate object. You can always turn these off. For example, if you have multiple iterations of a product, you can also bring them all in, again with the retained materials or with the material template that you can actually apply. And then can have them all sitting on top of each other and just turn them off one by one, just to show you know, these various you know, design iterations, for example, and you know, and render them out one by one. And in the past with KeyShot 2, there was actually a major performance hit when you did that, but not anymore. Not inside of KeyShot 3 anymore. So works quite nicely. Another way, of course, of doing things is if we just, you know, as far as multiple objects go, you can always go in and just right-click on it and say duplicate, right? And then you're basically creating also another instance of this, of the exact same object, right? And so with all the materials and everything being maintained, so you can do this as well. So I hope that answers the question.
Can you also show how you can work on two different windows or instances of KeyShot?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can always, like on Windows, you could work on multiple instances if you want. Is that, you mean just opening up another session?
Right.
Yeah, you can do that, but it's not. You can't copy and paste from one session into another, for example, right? So that's. And you don't gain too much from it, you know, because in the end, also, I mean, you can always fire up a second session and kick off a rendering if you want, but you know, of course, you're always taking away from the original session as far as performance goes, right? I mean, there's only 100% of CPU power, and if you have two sessions running or two renderings going and so forth, you know, then somehow you can't have 100% of each. Yeah.
But yes, so to answer that question, you don't necessarily need to close the first session to open a new one.
No. You can always pause that. Yeah, you can always pause that. That's a good point, right? I mean, if you don't want to open session, we can open, you know, multiple sessions here, and then, you know, we have, of course, full access, full performance, you know, with the second session. Yeah. Yeah. Let me look at some of the other questions here. This sucks here. How do I open this up? I thought this would work. Oh, maybe here? Okay, we're trying to figure out here a better way of, I'm seeing an extremely small window of, let's look at this. It's very good. Okay, got that. Wait. There we go. What the hell is this? Okay. Okay. This is annoying. This is why do I get the chat here? I need this, the question, so bear with me one second. Okay. Finally got it. I think I was blocking the view here. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the questions here that we have. I don't know why you can't make this bigger.
Can you double click it?
Oh, there we go. There we go. Make this window a little bigger. Okay. I don't see the, okay. Okay, Dave Prince says, it's a terrible function to automatically assign the same material. Much of what designers want us to do play with different materials. Would be much nicer if this was easier to turn off and without going into the program settings. Well, I think I showed how to turn that off and what to do. So it's just a hotkey combination. So I think we addressed that. But it does not update to the new red in the material window. Yeah, it does. It actually does. So, okay, Dave Prince. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, perfect. When I bring models in from Cinema 4D and SketchUp, some shapes fills and connect the edges of cut shapes. How can I avoid this? That is probably something inside of, I don't know what you're using as far as export from Cinema 4D goes, OBJ. I mean, just if you use OBJ, it really comes down to the exporter and the tessellation. So, yeah, send us an example. We can take a look at it. Okay, don't do it. Okay, this probably goes back to what I said, as far as dragging and dropping the materials on and just creating one material instead of instances. Okay. Let's see what else. Is there a possibility to add and create personal colors or textures? Yeah, in wood textures. Yes, absolutely. Mark, goes to you. Of course, all you need, there's nothing special about our textures. They're just image files. And all you need to do is basically, however you create your texture, including if you create normal maps or bump maps through applications like Filter Forge or Crazy Bump and so forth, all you got to do is bring that in. Let's say if we double click here on the material right here, for example, on the textures, right? Just you load basically any texture. You can even drag and drop it directly from your desktop as well, wherever it may be, and just apply that as a color map, as a bump map, and we support, of course, specular and opacity maps as well, right? So take one of these here, right, and apply that just to show you this. Makes for a highly unstable frame, of course, if I drill a bunch of holes in there. But, when you take a look at this here, for example, this is a normal map and an opacity map that we have applied here. And let's see, sync that. Yeah, so if I wanted to change that out, I just simply apply a new image file or a new normal map. It doesn't have to be a normal map, and then just save it back to your library, and you're good to go. Okay, we discussed what we'll be in for. Why don't we focus on KeyShot 3 first? This is, you have assembly files with 2,000 part files, and I've been applying materials one at a time. This takes a considerable amount of time because typically only apply materials to visible objects. Best apply materials to large assemblies. I think I showed that by dragging I think I showed that by doing that in the scene tree here, by applying the material on the top level of the assembly, and then of course by applying or by dragging and dropping the material right here on the assembly, that paints everything that's in this assembly. Also, if I wanted to apply that to multiple objects that are in or multiple assemblies, if you will, all I need to do is multi-select them and then drag the material on there as well. So I hope that that explains it. Another way of doing that is our material templates that we actually have here under the edit function. That is something new that we introduced in 3.1, where you can actually, especially when you have parts that have either materials that you have set up inside of an X5 with certain material names, or if you have certain part names, you can actually create like a source here by part of material, and then apply in this spreadsheet here, apply a material out of our material library. And so then each time you actually import your entire assembly, you can apply this template, and it will automatically paint all those parts or materials that you have specified in a material template. Webinar is sporadic. If you have any connections problems, then I think it's mostly a connection thing. Is there a way to save color swatches like Pantone colors with names and just apply them to part without affecting other material specs. No, but you can always, of course, enter, as you're editing a material here, for example, yeah, you can always specify the, the HSV or the RGB value right here on the Mac side, because we're using the native color picker from the Mac. You have also grayscale and CMYK, and that way you can actually apply and enter the proper values without affecting the rest of the material. Love the ability to paste or drop onto a linked material, but have a key to unlink it on the fly. Certainly, that is, yep, that's a good idea as well. How come when I export from 3D Studio OBJ, objects don't object clustered together? When you do actually, I don't know what I actually have an OBJ file. Let me just actually look at that. Yeah, we can. Just to show you the import option, it's for OBJ. Let's see, where would that be? Here we have a couple of, as you know, default models right here. So when you bring this in, I mean, this is, of course, only a single object, if you will. For those of you using an OBJ, we have the ability to either when you import them, to group by materials or by objects. So depending on how you have actually broken out your OBJ or how you have set up your, create your OBJ, if you have it by groups, make sure that you import by objects. If not, the default is by materials. So I think that will actually address the issue that you are seeing there. When you're importing. That was Harry Ortiz. Hope I pronounced that somewhat correctly. So in this case, this will actually address your grouping issues and your cluster issues here. And if all things fail, you can also try to keep individual parts. One warning is there with keep individual parts that you may end up with a bunch of individual surfaces as well, so that is not necessarily recommended. So try this first, the group by objects when you import it, and that should give you the desired result. All right, so we're past our time already. I think we answered all the questions. If there's any other questions, please feel free, send it to info@luxion.com, send it to me, thomas@luxion.com, or send it to support@luxion.com. Bruno will answer your questions and the rest of the team here. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll have that available for download later on today. If not today, then tomorrow. I hope this was somewhat informative for you. Again, different format, really going some of the ins and outs of KeyShot, on how it works and how it behaves. The next webinar will be more on the creative side again. Look for it towards the end of July. And then, looking at 11/18, wish you all a wonderful rest of your Thursday, or wherever you may be, maybe it be Friday, and rest of the week, and then happy 4th of July. For those of you who are not in the U.S., we have next week, part of the week off and enjoying the big holiday. And hope you have a good day. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.